Life can change in a moment and dreams can be shattered in an instant. 17-year-old David Kline was a star athlete, honor roll in school, involved in leading community theater, sang in the choir, popular with the girls, good-looking guy. He was getting ready for a big date. He was the all-American boy. But one beautiful summer day in California, David's life was changed forever and a new reality would set in, one that would leave him paralyzed. Dave, good meeting you, and thank you for being on the program today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's go back to your faith journey. How far back do you go when you made that decision that I'm going to follow Jesus?
Well, I thank God that He grabbed me so young. I was about 4 or 5 when I became a Christian. When I was 13, I thought, just in case I really didn't do it at 4 or 5, I'll do it again. And in my front yard, I remember asking God into my life just to be sure.
And it obviously made a big impact on you because, you know, your mom joined you on this trip here and she tells me what a good kid you were and all the rest of it. So even though you were young, it seemed to make a deep impression on you.
Yes, I always went to church, went to Bible studies. I had a great group of Christian friends. We made good decisions, didn't get into trouble. Life was good.
And you loved sports.
I loved sports. Track, basketball, soccer was my favorite. I played a lot of soccer, about 11 seasons worth.
And what was it about soccer that you liked?
I like the speed. In fact, still today, my favorite smell is fresh cut grass. I was good at it. I had good skills, and I really thought I had potential. I had received offers to play in college, so I thought maybe that was my future.
Okay, let's go back then to a day that, of course, you'll never forget, your family will never forget, July 7th, 1987. You're babysitting your 2 younger brothers and 2 other girls, a friend of the family. You're on the beach in California. It's a beautiful day. You want to go for a swim. Tell me what happened.
I was up on shore, keeping an eye on the kids. One of my brothers in the water called up to me. He said, "David, come swim with me." So I remember taking off my shoes, my watch, setting them on the towel. I ran down the sand, down the beach, into the water, dove in next to him, and somehow hit my head on the sand under the water, which instantly broke my neck, leaving me paralyzed. I was face down in the water and couldn't move.
What was going through your head at that moment? I mean, it's hard to think rationally at that moment, but did you know something was wrong right away?
Somehow I did know something was wrong. Maybe it was because I had read Johnny Erickson's book when I was younger, and I knew if you dive and hit your head, you could break your neck and be paralyzed. So I knew something was wrong, and in that moment, my first thought was, well, God will heal me. And looking back...
Really, at that moment, you thought that?
In that moment. And I don't know if that was God's voice or denial, but it kept me calm and at peace, even though I couldn't move face down under the water.
So, and Johnny Erickson, for those that don't know, in the early 70s, she had a diving accident. She was left a quadriplegic and has been an amazing ambassador for people with disabilities and giving hope in situations. So you had that in your mind. So tell me what happens then. You're paralyzed. How did you get out of the water?
Well, my brother standing over me, he had never seen his big brother injured. That thought didn't enter his mind, and he thought I was playing. I wouldn't turn over. He kept telling me to turn over. So finally, out of frustration, he flipped me over, thank God, and I was able to get a breath of air. And out of the corner of my eye, I could see my arm floating over here, and I couldn't feel it. I couldn't move it. And that really confirmed that indeed I had done something serious. So they called the lifeguard and the paramedic and took me to the hospital.
And you go to the hospital. Obviously, you know, there's just a lot of confusion going on. What were some of your early thoughts, David, as you're in that hospital room? And again, you were talking about God can heal you, but He might not. So what were some of the things going on in your mind?
Yeah, in the hospital, so many things were going on so fast. X-rays and MRIs and even just simple pin pricks. Can you feel this? Can you feel that? And I'd be, no, I can't feel that. I can't move that. And then things being done to my body, it was just kind of out of my control, but I remained calm. I think initially from that thought I had underwater that God will heal me, just kind of gave me a peace, which I'm really grateful for.
One of the things that brought me to tears in your book was your mom showing up. And you felt comfort because Mom was there.
And she tells the story to me because I don't remember much from the hospital days, but she came in and her first sight was me on my back on a gurney with some things already drilled into my skull and blood on the floor. But I turned to her and said, "Hi, Mom." And that just gave her a peace that I was still there. My brain was there.
Yeah, your brain was not affected at all. And we're going to talk about some of the amazing things that you have done since your accident many, many years ago. David Kline is our guest, and we're going to talk about how his faith was affected going through something like this when we come back. In July of 1987, David Kline had an accident, a swimming accident that left him paralyzed. He's quadriplegic. David, good having you on the program. When we went to the break, you're talking just about how, you know, your family was there, your mom was there. Tell me about the early days when it started to sink in that you may never walk again and play soccer and the things that you really wanted to do.
I think there was some denial on my part that this would be a long-lasting injury, which it typically is. We had read a book while I was in the hospital about a man who had been paralyzed, but 6 months later he was walking. So I kind of thought, I bet I could do that. So it took a number of months for it to start to settle in. Even in the hospital, they sent in a psychiatrist to talk to me who told me the stages I would go through, like anger. But I never did go through anger. I thought, I didn't do anything stupid, so I can't get mad at myself for that dive. And I didn't get mad at God because I've always thought, God knows what he's doing. I don't know the purpose for this, but I think there is one. So I trusted him. Even when I was in the hospital, they brought in a man to counsel me. He was in a wheelchair. He had been in a wheelchair for a few years. And so they wheeled him in while I was on my hospital bed. And within minutes, he starts complaining about his life, how horrible it is. So from my hospital bed, I had to try to cheer him up. I was telling him, hey, you just got to have faith. You know, things will get better.
Wow. Well, you know, we talked about Johnny Erickson Tata a few minutes ago, and here's something she says. A life-altering injury can either diminish a person's character or become a platform for which character grows. And then she describes you, David. I know you guys are good friends. She endorsed your book as well. Yet you're enthusiastic, optimistic, a go-getter. A man's passion is to showcase the glory of God. Has that been one of the things, David, that's got you through this, that okay, this is not what I would have chosen, certainly, to be spending my days in a wheelchair, but you felt there was a purpose for this?
I did. I didn't know what the purpose was, and I can't imagine going through this without God and without my faith in God and his promises. From the beginning, I've really relied on Romans 8:28, which says all things work together for good to them who love God and are called according to his purpose.
And not that all things are good, but he can take it and make it good.
Yes. And I think that's a promise, and God's never failed on a promise, so I can trust him in this. So I thought, well, then what is good? He says all things will work for good, and I don't think it's what some people think, like, oh, I'm going to win the lottery. I think it's more of an eternal thing, the way God sees good. So even though I might be struggling now, going through tough times now, he's promised that he's going to work it out for good, and it might mean hope for someone. It might mean someone comes to know God and have a relationship with him. So I just try to hang in there and trust him and know that he's going to take me where he wants.
What has it done to your faith, David, when this goes? And again, reading your book, the thing that really came very clear through it, Walk by Faith, is the fact that you didn't really get angry. I'm sure you had your moments, right? You had moments because you're probably not perfect.
I've had tough moments, but I don't think I've gotten angry.
Yeah, okay.
I've just tried to trust God.
So in trusting God, you've seen the purpose. So what does that purpose look like for David Kline?
That's a good question. I think when I was in college, when I decided to become a high school teacher, that is not a goal I'd ever had when I was younger, but it just hit me one day. I think that's where God wants me. He wants to use me, hopefully to be a positive influence to young people. So I became a high school teacher and did that for 17 years, and I really believe that was maybe a purpose for this whole accident. That's where God wanted me.
I'm sure if you could have had your agenda, you'd have been a soccer star.
Exactly.
You know, maybe playing in England somewhere, yes. Something like that. But he took you in a different direction. It went in a different direction. But you also lived out that dream in a sense that you became a soccer coach.
That was a surprise for me because I didn't know I could be a soccer coach after suffering an injury like this, but when a man came up to me one day and asked if I would coach his son's soccer team. He had heard my story, knew I had played, and so I said yes. And for 5 years, I coached soccer. I think at the high school I coached at, I had the only undefeated season in school history. Wow. So we had a lot of success, but it was just great for me mentally and emotionally being out there in part with the game I love so much.
How was it for you as a teacher with the kids? Some of them probably, whoa, my teacher is in a wheelchair. How's this going to work? Was that an inspiration for some of these young folks?
I sure hope so. Early on in the school year, I would tell them my story, and I'd let them ask questions. So from the beginning, I'd get the disability thing out of the way, and just soon enough, I was a teacher who gave too much homework, graded too harshly. But I really had a good time with them. I think I gave them respect, they gave me respect, and I joked around with them and had high standards for them. So I really enjoyed that experience.
And they couldn't use the excuses that maybe I'm just not up to it, or, I think
Right.
you taught them perseverance.
Yeah, they couldn't say, well, I couldn't do my homework because I hurt my arm. Because, here I've typed their instruction for the day, and typing's a challenge for me.
There's many things, David, that impress me about you, but you wrote your book, Walk by Faith, in which we'd encourage people to get. It's an inspiring story, an encouraging story, but you did it just by using your hand. You didn't dictate it, you didn't have somebody else doing it for you. Why did you feel you needed to do that? Or what was the motivation behind that?
I just felt like I wanted to do it. The software that I had looked at for dictation, I didn't think was good enough, and I just thought, I'm just gonna type this out. And yes, I type with the outside corner of my left knuckle, one key at a time. It took a long time, took many years, but I was so glad to accomplish it.
Well, you're a guy that can certainly persevere. Before we go, what would you say to people that are struggling with disabilities? Maybe not as serious as yours, or maybe even more serious. What would you say to them? What hope could you bring them?
Well, for me, it's all about faith. And God says if we ask for faith, He'll give it to us. And I really believe that. He's certainly done that for me. So I would encourage people just to trust and know that God is going to use us in whatever circumstance He has us to glorify Him. And I think this life is just a snap of the fingers when we look at eternity. And if we can bring hope to someone, encouragement to someone, or even help lead someone to Jesus, I think that's the bigger picture that I try to focus on.
Well, that eternal perspective is so important. David Kline, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for
having me. And highly recommend your book, Walk by Faith. And as you're watching today, maybe your situation is not as serious as David's. Maybe you've got something terminal, or you're feeling despair. We have amazing prayer people standing by that will encourage you, that will pray with you. Maybe you've never made that decision to follow Jesus, one that David made as a 4-year-old and I made as a 23-year-old. Wherever you are in your life, God is waiting for you just to come to Him. He's already there. Give us a call, 1-866-273-4444.